Today I want to share with you how I make some of my little collage art journals. So you can either paint in them or use collage and paint and watercolor or acrylic. And so you can just use up bits of scrap from your collage bin or old paintings or old jelly prints and create these fun little art journals. They're really fun to take away with you when you travel or just use up bits and bobs in your studio. So we're gonna hop inside and get started. They're really fun to make and I can't wait to share them with you. So first I'm going to show you this little art journal that I created out of brown paper lunch bags. Now I make these a lot of times with my students and especially with kids, and they're really fun because the brown paper bags turn into these little pockets. And so this one is all collage and it's decorated in the back with colorful paper and just like collage images. So they're really fun to make. They're super easy to do. Inside the pockets, I've used heavy watercolor paper, and those are individually decorated, and you can pull them out, and they're like a little surprise. There's some things I don't like about them. Like I don't really enjoy working on the paper bags, but a lot of my students really love making these. So I've kind of created these other ones that I really like making at home, and I make signatures out of watercolor paper, just regular 140-pound watercolor paper, and then I put a couple of the paper bags so that we have the pocket element inside these journals. So I cut signatures. I just fold a piece of watercolor paper in half. I create the pages using watercolor paper because then you can draw and paint on those if you choose to. It's a heavier substrate. It's better for painting and drawing. So if you really want to paint and draw on those pages, you can. It's a little better for that kind of artwork. You could use markers, you can use pencil, you can use any kind of paint on those, and it just works better for regular art. And then if you want the little element of that little surprise, with a little pocket hiding a little piece of something inside, that's really fun too. So what I do is I make either 2 or 3 signatures, and then I hide a little pocket inside. And so here I'm just cutting all the watercolor pages the same size, and I make them a little bit wider than the bag so the bag doesn't stick out. And then I get it all lined up together, as you'll see. It doesn't have to be super precise, just make sure everything's lined up and it looks really good. Then I just want to make sure that my paper bags are just slightly smaller than the watercolor pages. That way they're not sticking out in any way and they're hidden within the pages. Once I'm sure everything fits properly and I know everything is measured correctly, I'm going to just trim the bags, put everything together, and then I'm going to assemble them. You just want to make sure everything is lined up properly before you begin to staple. I'm going to staple this book together. Sometimes I use a hole punch and then lace it together. I've also put these on the sewing machine. There's so many ways you can do it. Today I'm going to staple, and later I'm going to go over and hot glue some lace trim over the top to hide the staple marks. Stapling works really great when you have several signatures. So that's what I'm going to do today. It really holds it together really well. Don't rush this part because you want everything to lay properly and you don't want to have anything not lined up properly, because if you go to staple and something's not in the right alignment, you could miss a page, and then you'll have to pull the staples out and start over, and you don't want to have to do that. Just take a few extra seconds to get everything in proper order before you staple, and it'll come out perfectly. I really like to go through the book and bend the pages back so everything lays flat when I'm working on it, and it also puts less stress on the staples. It's easier to work on when you're painting and drawing, and also when you're doing your collage work. And also, you don't want to put a lot of stress on the staples. So this just helps in general. I usually go in both directions. So the really fun part of these is when we start to create and decorate in them. So I usually get out my box of collage, and in my box of collage I have all kinds of things, like things I've cut out of magazines, old painted papers from different projects, jelly prints, other printed papers, old paintings, all kinds of things like that, things I've saved from magazine clippings, or interesting things I've saved for collage. And a lot of the collage things I have also are from vintage magazines and things like that. I may have some fabrics. I have other things like that. I have some papers that I've been using from other journals that I've made, and these papers are from journal books that I created in a different project, and those are the ones I use to make the pockets for the other journals. So I may use some of that because they're already painted and they were really, really pretty. So they have two different sides, and they were probably one piece of paper that I decorated and painted. I think I did a workshop in that at some point, and I ended up generating a whole bunch of those in one day, just doing demos on how to do that process. I've taught, that kind of thing for so many years that I end up having lots and lots of demo pieces of things like that, but then I end up using them in other projects. So then I have just a lot of that kind of thing in a box, in boxes, and then I just pull all that stuff out. The blue papers are actually from that same journaling workshop that I taught, and those are another, basis for a journal book that was done in that same workshop. So I could use those if I chose for the pockets. Old dictionary pages are really cool, old sheet music, anything like that. And, you can clip your own, make your own, or just draw and paint in here if you'd like. Sometimes I like to go through and just take an interesting colored background to get started. So some of this stuff was from a book about collaging, and so I think I just took the interesting papers out and tossed the rest away. I probably got it at a tag sale or a thrift shop maybe. And then you can just start out like that with just a really pretty painted paper background. Origami paper can be really pretty sometimes. You can just throw that in the background and then just start layering. There's so many different ways you can do collage. I have a friend I actually have more than one friend that only uses photographs, and they just cut up old photographs, either their own, or sometimes they buy boxes of vintage photographs that they pick up here, there, and everywhere, and they just cut those up and use actual photographs. There's so many ways that you can collage. So here I'm using stick glue. In this particular journal, I ended up using PVA glue, stick glue, and I think hot glue, all three in this one journal. And I also used watercolor and acrylic and markers. So I used all kinds of things. So this is truly a mixed media, anything goes kind of project. The stick glue works pretty well for all kinds of things when you're doing this. I used a lot of fabric pieces. I used some ribbon and things. So don't be afraid to mix media. And these are all just starting points. In some cases, I'll put this stuff down, and it's a bottom layer. It's the first layer. And if I don't end up liking what it looks like, I will either paint over it with acrylic paint, or I will color over it with something else, a marker or something. I will cover it up with another piece of collage. There's so many options when you're doing this type of work. What I love most about collage is that you could take things from different sources, put them down together, and try out new compositions. When they're not working, sometimes all it takes is just adding one color and painting a little of the background out, and it'll pull the whole thing together. It's a really fun way to experiment with new ideas, new concepts, and new things you wouldn't normally have come up with. It's really exciting to take all these little pieces from different sources, move them around, and come up with an idea for a painting that never would have evolved if you weren't working in this really different and interesting way. It's a really super fun way to work, and I hope you will try it yourselves. I can't wait to show you how my book came out, so let's do a flip through. I can't resist putting animals and plants and flowers and butterflies into my paintings. I really love the woman with the birds flying, and I love that composition. I love the pockets, but you don't really have to add the paper bags if you don't like them. I don't really like painting on them, but once you start adding a lot of paint to them, this one is just painting and drawing with a pencil and watercolor. I don't really like the way the paper bag feels, but you can't really tell once you start layering a lot of acrylic paint on top of it. That one has so much paint and collage. I put down a big piece of collage on that page and did not like it, so I just painted over it with acrylic. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please like, share, and subscribe to my channel, as it does help the channel grow, and I do really appreciate it so much. Thanks for being here, and please come again soon.